What's up, everyone? I'm James Lynch. This is Early Look, the show where I take a look at an upcoming notable fight. And on today's edition, I'm going to be previewing the welterweight title fight, UFC 296, December 16th, Colby Covington against champion Leon Edwards. This is going to be a good one. And if you haven't watched the show before, I'm going to go through a bunch of different stats, a bunch of different intangibles, and then I'll give you my pick at the end. Would love to hear from you in the comments after this video. If you could let me know your prediction for this fight, and we can discuss this matchup, which I think is going to be pretty interesting coming up here in the next little bit. Let's do a quick tail of the tape of these two. The current champ Leon Edwards, 21-3. Colby Covington, 17-3. 32-35, 6'2" to 5'11", 74-72. So Leon going to be younger and a little bit bigger in this fight. And we're going to start with Rocky first, who's the current welterweight champion. So I mentioned that there he's 21-3, 6'2" with a 74-inch reach. So Leon Edwards in this fight will have a slight height advantage here, 2 inches of a height and 2 inches of a reach advantage in this fight. He's also 3 years younger than Colby Covington. Leon Edwards is a southpaw, former BAMMA welterweight champion. He's the current UFC welterweight champion. He's a BJJ purple belt, and he trains at a Team Renegade BJJ. He is the one-time UFC welterweight champion, just with one title defense against Kamaru Usman. He is the first Jamaican-born UFC champion in history. He's got performance of the night 2 times against Sespajinski and Kamaru Usman. He's also got the 6th fastest finish in UFC history when he knocked out Sespajinski in 8 seconds. I think people forget that. And he's also tied with George St. Pierre for the second longest unbeaten streak in UFC welterweight division history at 12. Leon started his MMA career way back in March of 2011, ended up with a no contest there, made his MMA debut in June of 2011, and did not make his UFC debut until 2014 in November, where he lost a split decision to Claudio Silva. We'll talk about that in a second here. Leon Edwards is 13-2 in the UFC. He's got 4 stoppage wins. Some notable wins for Leon Edwards include Vicente Luque, Donald Cowboy Cerrone, who is just notable in terms of who he is. Gunnar Nelson at the time, I believe, was ranked. There was a good win. Rafa dos Anjos, and then obviously Nate Diaz, and then has 2 wins now over Kamaru Usman, which are by far his best wins. He had the 2 losses. I mentioned Claudio Silva. He also lost to Kamaru Usman by decision way back in December of 2015 in that matchup. And actually, one interesting thing with Edwards is he actually started his career at 185, had just his first 2 fights were at 85, and then has fought at welterweight since. Leon's had a few layoffs in his career, nothing compared to Colby Covington, which we'll talk about later. He's got a layoff from Rafa dos Anjos to Bilal Muhammad. There was a 602-day layoff, not because of him. It was mainly, what was going on with COVID and him being able to fight. Remember, you're supposed to have that fight with Tyron Woodley, which never ended up happening, which was part of that canceled event for the UFC. So that was part of it. And then you had all the Chimaev fights, which never ended up happening. I think people forget about that, COVID and a bunch of other things. And then going from Nate Diaz to Kamaru Usman, there was a 434-day layoff. So a bit of a layoff there, but this is going to be the first time in a couple of years that Leon Edwards is going to be fighting twice in the same year. The last time was back in 2021 when he fought Bilal Muhammad and Nate Diaz in the same year. This year, going to be getting 2 in on the calendar year as well. One thing with Leon Edwards, has not had any major injuries, no major layoffs outside of the things I just mentioned there. He's had a couple close fights. Let's talk about the Claudio Silva fight. So that was a split decision loss. If you go on MMAdecisions.com right now, you can see the media scorecards for that. That was back in November of 2014. 2 media members scored the fight for Claudio Silva. 9 scored it for Edwards and 1 scored it a draw. So that's a fight that likely should have gone Leon Edwards' way. Then if you look at the Usman loss, that was back at UFC 286 in March of 2000 and wrong fight I'm looking at there. The Usman fight was not close. Usman clearly won that. It was the last fight he had against Kamaru Usman, UFC 286. That was in March of this year. 19 media members scored the fight for Leon Edwards. 11 scored it a draw, and 2 scored it for Usman, which I think is interesting. I think a lot of people forget that fight was fairly close, but Edwards getting the majority of scorecard nods on that one. So that's, obviously I think most people felt like Edwards did win that fight. Let's go look at some stats with Leon Edwards here. So you can look there. Significant strikes landed per minute is 2.80. His striking accuracy is at 53%. His striking defense is at 53% as well. So he does get hit a little bit. Not as many strikes as you would think with him having pretty good striking. And then his takedown average is at 1.26. Although I don't think we'll see it in this fight. His takedown accuracy is at 33%, and his takedown defense is at 69%. We'll see if Colby goes for any takedowns in this fight. And his submission average is at 0.03. Does not really use his ground game that much in the fight. So that's pretty much everything you need to know about the current welterweight champion Leon Edwards. And before we talk about Colby Covington in 1 second here, I've got a pretty cool giveaway to tell you about. We already know that Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm and have a proven track record of fighting for the people with over $15 billion recovered for their clients. And we know that submitting an injury claim with Morgan & Morgan is free and easy. But did you know that they are the official law firm partner of the UFC? Get ready for UFC 296, where Colby Covington will be taking on welterweight champion Leon Edwards in the main event. And thanks to Morgan & Morgan, we're giving away tickets to witness the action. They're giving one lucky winner $2,000 and 2 tickets to UFC 296 to see Edwards and Covington go to battle in Las Vegas. Entering to win is easy. All you need to do is text SPORT to for the people. That's 484-373-6742. Or just click the link in the description of this video, which is morganufc.com/Lynch on Sports. You definitely don't want to miss this. This is going to be one of the best cards of 2023. Let's talk about Colby Covington, Colby Chaos Covington, I should say. You can see there, Colby with a 17-3 record. He's got 4 knockouts, 4 submissions, and 9 decisions. He's the number 3 ranked welterweight at the time we're recording this. He's 35 years old, 5'11" with a 72-inch reach. No major physical advantages here, whether it's height, reach, or age, or anything like that. He is the former interim welterweight champion. I think a few people forget that. He's got fight of the night 2 times against Kamaru Usman and Jorge Masvidal. He trains out of MMA Masters, and he got his BJJ black belt. It was either earlier this year or last year. I can't remember, but he's got his black belt there. So his ground game, supposedly very good. Made his amateur debut way back in August of 2006. Did not make his professional debut until almost half after that, in 2012, making his debut there, and then did not make his UFC debut until August of 2014. So he only had 5 fights before getting signed to the UFC. That's like kind of Contender Series style. So I think people also forget a little bit about that. Colby Covington is 12-2 in the UFC. He's got 4 stoppage victories. Some notable wins include Damian Maia, who I believe was ranked at the time he fought him. Rafa dos Anjos, which was for the interim title. We'll talk about that fight a little bit later, but that was a notable win. Robbie Lawler was notable in the sense that he was a former champion, as was Tyron Woodley, and Jorge Masvidal, his former training partner, was also a former title challenger as well. So got to mention those wins. A lot of people bring up the fact that Colby does not have a single ranked win right now, with a lot of those fighters leaving the rankings or retiring or whatever in terms of his level of opposition. As losses include Warley Alves, which was a first-round submission loss, and then he had the 2 losses to Usman as well, one being a little bit closer. The first Usman fight, he got finished in the 5th round in that fight. Now, the story with Colby Covington is something that we have to address here, and it's the amount of layoffs he's had in his career. And trust me, as someone who enjoys watching Covington fight, the layoffs are definitely, it sucks. You want to see a fighter a lot more active. So going from Rafa dos Anjos to Robbie Lawler, there's a 420-day layoff. What's the interesting thing is that Colby was pretty active prior to all these issues he was having. If you look here, made his debut, like I said, in 2014. He fought 3 times in 2014, including a regional fight as well. Fought twice in 2015. He fought 3 times in 2016. 2 times in 2017, once in 2018, and then that's where things started to take a dive here. So if you go from Rafa dos Anjos to Robbie Lawler, there was a 420-day layoff. Going from Kamaru Usman to Tyron Woodley, there was a 280-day layoff. Going from Kamaru Usman to Jorge Masvidal, there was a 651-day layoff. And then, going from Kamaru Usman to Jorge Masvidal, you can see there was a 413-day layoff. And then going from Jorge Masvidal to Leon Edwards, there's a 651-day layoff. So biggest layoff of his career is going to be going into this fight, and it's going to be a tall task fighting the current welterweight champion, Leon Edwards. He's never had any major issues with any injuries or USADA or anything like that. The only injury he did have was he had a nose injury that prevented him from fighting Woodley the time when Darren Till got the fight. So there was that, which he hurt, I believe, in the... I think it was the Rafa dos Anjos fight, or actually might have even been after that in training. I'm not sure exactly. Colby's had a couple close fights. So the Rafa dos Anjos fight, which he won by decision, that ended up, that was at UFC 225 for the interim title back in June of 2018. 22 media members scored the fight for Colby Covington. 6 scored it for Rafa dos Anjos. I've watched this fight a couple times. I don't think dos Anjos won, but teach their own. Maybe there's a bit of hatred on the Colby side as to why people thought RDA won that fight, but I think he clearly won. The Kamaru Usman fight, which was his second most recent fight, he lost by decision in that one. I know Colby will say he felt like he won and he was robbed in the fight. I thought Usman won. And looking at the media scorecards, they agree with me here. UFC 268, November of 2021. 18 media members scored the fight for Usman. 3 scored it a draw. Not a single media member scored the fight for Colby Covington. but definitely close. And then, even the first fight against Kamaru Usman, I thought that fight was fairly even until Usman finished it. So that's another thing we got to kind of, mention as well in this. Colby's stats are pretty decent. We've got significant strikes landed per minute, 4.10. So you'll see there, his strikes landed per minute is actually higher than Leon Edwards, which is interesting. And then his striking accuracy is only at 39%, so that's kind of low. Doesn't actually hit his opponents that much. His striking defense is at 55, so it's slightly higher than Leon Edwards. His takedown average is at 4.05, so likely we'll see some wrestling here. And then his takedown accuracy is at 45%, so just below half. His takedown defense is at 72%. So we'll see if Leon tries to go and do a takedown here, but Colby's takedown defense pretty solid. Let's look at the odds right now. You can see most books having Leon Edwards as a slight favorite. I actually figured he'd be a bit higher of his favorite, but just about -130, -115. One book, Caesars, having him. Actually, Bet Rivers has it at FanDuel. Sorry, -136 is the highest line we've seen so far. But for the most part, it's almost close to a pick'em in terms of the odds right now, with Leon Edwards being a slight favorite. And then, as we always do on Tapology, if you look at the fan voting, 64% picking Edwards, 36% picking Colby Covington. Now, people who are just casually watching my content would probably just say, hey, James, you're picking Colby here, right? But if you've actually watched my content over the last bit and you're a regular viewer, you know which way I'm going on this because I've already told you my pick, and it's Leon Edwards. Listen, I think, again, Colby, I think, is underestimated a lot by people, but I have a hard time picking him in this fight for a variety of reasons. We're going to go over them right now. Number one, the most obvious one, Leon Edwards has been far more active, and he's been performing at a level against some pretty good opposition overall. Again, I know there was the weird fight with Nate Diaz, and then there's a whole thing with Bilal Muhammad, but even before Bilal, I thought he looked good. The fights with Usman, it's iffy because, Usman's obviously a bit older, maybe he's slowed down a bit since the Colby fights, but still, he beat Usman twice, and he's the only guy to ever finish Kamaru Usman in the UFC. That's an incredible feat. So you got to give him his flowers with that. And then on top of that, Colby's wins haven't exactly aged too well, right? Like if you go look here, Masvidal retired shortly after that. Woodley retired shortly after that. Robbie Lawler, a couple fights later, retired. Dos Anjos, not in the weight class. Maia retired shortly after that. So it's tough because he's fighting the guys he's supposed to fight, and he's winning, but it's like they haven't been quality wins. Like he hasn't fought like a Gilbert Burns or Bilal Muhammad or any of these other guys, or Chimaev, right? And there's a whole bunch of politics behind the scenes. We know all that. It doesn't matter which side you're taking. It's tough to kind of gauge how good Colby is because he hasn't fought the opposition to sort of back it up here. Now, how do I think Leon's going to win? I think he's going to win by decision. And this might not be a popular pick. I know some people might feel like Leon can knock him out, but the stats don't lie. If you look at Leon Edwards' stats, 50% of his wins are by decision. A lot of people think of him as a knockout artist. Only 35% of his wins are by knockout, 15 by submission. I could even understand maybe if Leon was more of a submission guy, but, Colby's got a pretty good ground game. He's only been submitted once, and that was a fight that I think, 9 times out of 10, Colby fights Warlley Alves, it might be a different outcome. Colby's only ever been finished once in his entire career in the UFC. I know outside the UFC he was finished, but that was a 5th round finish. So that again leads to the fact that Colby's probably not going to get finished early in this fight, and Edwards isn't much of a finisher either. Like I mentioned, Colby's wins have not aged well, not to mention he's 35 right now. So there is a possibility of maybe we see a decline here. Bottom line is this, and the odds indicate this. It's going to be a close fight because there's that unknown of Colby not, what's he been doing in the gym? Because we've always seen, every now and then you see a fighter who's been off for a while and they end up looking even better than we thought. The other thing is Colby hasn't taken much damage other than that first Usman fight, right? So there's something to be said for that, but neither is Leon, right? Leon really hasn't taken much damage either. So it's not a case of, Colby being battered and taking this fight and being a bit older. If anything, the time off probably helped him. So look, this is razor close, but I got to go Leon Edwards here. Again, the stats and everything else just back it up. Now, would it surprise me if Colby won? Absolutely not. This has been a weird year for fighters, underdogs winning. And, it's not like Edwards excels in any particular area here. If you look at the first Usman fight, yeah, he knocked him out, but that was a 5th round knockout that he knocked him out at. And, Usman was most likely going to win that fight. The rematch was close. Leon got it done. Does that speak more to Leon's skill set, or does that speak more to Usman's decline? We don't really know. So again, this is a tricky fight to kind of figure out. I don't think one way or the other you can feel great. And then on the flip side, same thing with Colby. Colby's not a knockout artist. He's not a submission threat. He's got good cardio and good wrestling. Well, guess what? Leon's got good cardio too. He's gone 5 rounds in Utah with Kamaru Usman. His cardio is great. And again, I think it's not like there's been a weakness in wrestling. He took Usman down, if anything. So I think his wrestling's quite up to par. He's got a good ground game. This is a tricky fight, but I got to go Leon Edwards by decision. So there we go. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Let me know which side you're going with here. What's your prediction? I want to hear that. I don't want to hear I'm picking such and such, and then you're going to come back after and say, oh, I told you so. Again, I think it's a very, very, very close fight. And I don't think one way or the other you can have a strong lean. And I think the betting odds indicate that. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @Lynch on Sports. I'm James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.